All right, so I'll tell you what I wanted to rant about, and I've seen like a million videos about this whole situation with Dan Crenshaw, David Goggins, and yeah, we want to have our own viral video talking about this situation. But I think I could give a little bit more insight into it than some of these other videos, some of what the backstory behind it. So I'll get into it with you guys as much as I can, I guess. So you may remember, the listeners may remember that we had a guy on the show named John Bartolo, and John Bartolo was friends with a guy named PJ Braun. We asked him about this, how PJ Braun and his business partner, Aaron Singerman, were going to jail for what they did at Blackstone Labs in terms of putting stuff in supplements that was, illegal, basically, that was not supposed to be on the shelves. And this is kind of interesting. You're probably wondering where I'm going with this. So PJ Braun is still in prison for that. John Bartolo passed away, as we know. The other guy, Aaron Singerman, did less time than his business partner, the CEO of, and you guys probably know them, Redcon One, is a really big supplement company. So the fact that he did less than a year and this other guy is still in jail, we could, we don't know exactly, but you can imply that speculate that he may have ratted on someone or snitched on someone, the fact that he did a lot less time than his business partner. So he is the one who conducted the interview with Dan Crenshaw prior to the response and prior to him going to jail. And this happened years ago. So that's why you finally heard a response from David Goggins all these years later. And if you haven't seen, I'm sure you guys have seen the video with all that stuff, but what originally happened was Dan Crenshaw was on with Aaron Singerman, and he just simply asked, "Hey, how do you feel about David Goggins?" And that's when Dan Crenshaw went in a whole thing. He's like, "Oh, well, he didn't really do much in combat, and he's more of a motivational guy in terms of doing these super marathons and all that." So I don't. And he's like, "Yeah, there he is with the trident in his uniform on his book." And I mean, you could give background on this, but I just feel like, look, it doesn't matter what you did in the teams. And I read David Goggins' book. If you honorably served, you have every right to wear the uniform and promote that on your book. If you didn't, that's a different story, but there's definitely nothing wrong with that. So
does Dave, and like I tell Ian, I really didn't know much about, I don't really pay attention to much of this except from when you tell me with these two, because I really am not a fan of either of them, to be honest with you. But I said I'm not either. I'm not a fan. I'm a fan. I'm indifferent, to be honest with you. With this, did David say he was in combat? Did he say he was this ultra cool warrior that he did? Did he say that? If he did,
no. So that's the thing.
Okay,
and
okay.
As someone,
I need some more information. I need
yeah.
some
Well,
more
this and
I
here's we'll get to all that, because so yeah, if you read his book, which is a very good book, I mean, tons of you guys read it. I know a lot of the same people who read 13 Hours read David Goggins' book, and I think a lot of it was more just about the inspiration of him being this, he would say, obese guy working a minimum wage job, drinking milkshakes every night, to becoming this super fit athlete, triathlete, and ultra marathon runner, and in between all of that, also joining the SEALs. It was a smaller part of the book. It wasn't the entirety of the book, but it was about pushing himself to the limits, as all of you guys do. So no, he didn't make any claims that he didn't do anything, or that he did something that he didn't do. Nothing like that. But you later learn, because David Goggins goes on Aaron Singerman's podcast after all of this happens, and he has the receipts. The reason that Dan Crenshaw may have decided to say all this stuff is because it turns out when Dan Crenshaw put out a book, he asked David Goggins, "Hey, could you give me a little quote for the book?" And I think David Goggins either didn't say anything or he just declined. And so I think this was just all about personal nonsense. I don't think he has anything bad to say about David Goggins. I think it was just like, "Oh, you didn't give me a quote for my book, so I'm going to bicker about that on some guy's podcast," and this is what pisses me off about the whole thing. It's like, you are a congressman. And David Goggins can say whatever he wants to, because he's like anybody else in the teams or in special operations who put out a book, who goes on podcasts. But when you decide to be a congressman, your life should be about enriching your constituents and taking, care of problems in your community. And every congressional district, I might not know his congressional district in Texas, has issues. And they don't care about seeing you put out a 30-minute response video, which he did on your social media, to go tit for tat with David Goggins. It has nothing to do with being a congressman. And I think David Goggins was in the right when he's like, hey, here's the message that you sent me because you wanted me to do a quote for your book, and I decided not to. So you went on this guy's podcast and had all this negative stuff to say about me. So, it's not about being team this guy or team the other guy, but I actually think David Goggins was very much in the right on this one. So
yeah, it just sounds like petty bullshit, to be honest. It really is petty. Who gives a shit? I mean, if Goggins was out there spewing that he did a bunch of shit in combat, which I don't know anybody that knows him in the teams. Granted, I'm not a SEAL. I have served. I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express though. No, I'm kidding. I have served with that SEAL, of course. So if Goggins wasn't out there saying shit that he didn't do, then who gives a rat's fucking ass? And yeah, I'm agree with you, Crenshaw. Do your fucking job. Your job is to be a congressman. Stop pulling the Trump card. Literally, I think that's what the problem now with politicians and Trump is a lot of responsible for it. That politicians think that's the route to go to win their constituency, is to get all over social media and spew and get into petty fights, when instead of, hey, shut your fucking ass, go in your office and do your damn job. Come on, SEAL, selfless service. That's what you're supposed to do. Not narcissism, and take the, Goggins a little bit narcissistic as well. I think a lot of special operations guys have a little bit of narcissism in there. I've seen a couple of Goggins speeches, and I'm getting off subject a bit, but where he says, yeah, I'm the first black SEAL, black this, black. I don't like that. I don't think any special operations.
Well, wait, has he ever said that though? Because has he ever said that though? Because I don't think he's the first black SEAL. I don't think so.
Or to accomplish something. I cut it. It was during a speech. For me to do mine wouldn't be a speech. I got to give. I do look at I look at Kenny Thomas. I do research it. I was like, man, how did he do this? Because I think everybody, whether I like you or not, I think I can learn how to be a good speech giver, watching other veterans that have come before me talk, like Marcus, like Kenny Thomas from Black Hawk Down is a tremendous speaker. Matt Eversman, Kirk Leopold. I've watched Goggins and because let's see what he does. Maybe there's something I can steal from him. And that's what we do. I mean, why reinvent the wheel? I mean, make it your own with speeches, but if guys are doing stuff that wouldn't get the crowd's attention, let's use it. Then I look at guys like coaches. Jim Valvano is a guy I watched relentlessly to become a good speech giver. What I'm getting at is I watched Goggins once, and he said it was the first African-American for something. I don't remember, but as soon as I heard that, I think anybody in the special operations community would be like, whoa, that's not what's said. If you come to Ranger Battalion and I come in, I'm the first Mexican, obviously I'm not, but even if I said any sort of race, no, there's not race here. You know what your race is? Your race is Ranger. Your race is SEAL. That bothered me a bit when I saw that. So when you brought the Dan Crenshaw thing up, thinking, well, maybe there's some narcissistic clashes here between the two. And that's what it sounds like it is. Getting back on subject, though, and I'm not going to beat up Goggins because...
can I just say this, though? I think David Goggins, though, whatever you feel, he has every right to respond because he's not the one who talked shit about Dan Crenshaw. Dan Crenshaw.
No, you're right. No.
And I think if anybody said anything negative about you on a podcast or me, I would want to go on and give my take on things, which is all that he did.
You're right, and I'm not give me if I'm wrong, guys. I went off on a tangent a little bit. I'm not defending either of them. Goggins responded. I don't know if I would respond, but regardless, he shouldn't have had to respond because Crenshaw needs to just shut the hell up and do his job. I agree with what Crenshaw said, the stuff that you told me and the stuff that you sent me a link when we first talked about it before I read it. I don't disagree with a lot of that. I don't, because if you go to a lot of this, we have things called badge chasers in the military, where you go to school after school after school because you're really trying to duck time on a team and duck deployments. I kind of have to say Crenshaw is kind of right there. But that being said, who gives a fuck? Why do you even need to say it? There's no reason to say it. If you guys have an issue, go to a bar, talk to each other, get your SEAL petty differences out of the way, Or if it, and I'm not saying, because if I was a ranger, we do the same thing, but you don't need to put it in public view. And like you said, and I completely agree with you, Ian, he's a congressman. Do your fucking job. Your job is not to do stupid videos ranting about a fellow SEAL or a fellow teammate or a fellow peer, so everybody can see because you got butt hurt over something that went on. So I know we're ranting about it now because it gives us good, I get good, maybe some viral stuff will go on.
No, but I actually
but
will say that what if it was just two SEALs going at it, I wouldn't have cared and I wouldn't have ranted on it. I think it's just the fact that this is indicative of what goes on in politics now. Everyone wants to have a viral moment. Everyone has to make it all about, these things that have absolutely nothing. And if this is what he wanted to do, and that's fine. I mean, look, the guy honorably served. The guy lost his eye in combat. All the respect in the world for Dan Crenshaw. But if this is the type of stuff you want to do, don't become a congressman. That's my main point. And then the other point I'll make about it that I thought was completely ridiculous, and I think you're going to agree, and you can watch it in the video. I didn't even watch the whole thing. But David Goggins was responding to how stupid, the comments were. And he goes, yeah, this is all ridiculous bullshit. This is Real Housewives of SEAL Team 6. And Dan Crenshaw acted like that was the most offensive thing to say. And he was like, when I think of SEAL Team 6, I think of guys who honorably served. I would never use this term, Real Housewives of SEAL Team 6. And dude, I've heard that long before David Goggins. It's actually like a funny analogy. It's a way to say that we're bickering over stupid stuff. And in no way, I think you really have to have your head out there to think him saying SEAL Team 6 was a way to disrespect the SEAL teams. It's a term, it's funny. And if you're going to tell me you're that thin-skinned as a Navy SEAL, I don't believe you.
But I recall saying that down range around the fire when people were having drama on a deployment. Like, what the fuck is this, Real Housewives of the fucking CIA compound? Come on, Dan. We have said that so many damn times. It is. That is actually, Goggins said it because that's what we would always say to make a point. If something was ridiculousness, beyond ridiculousness, you reach ridiculousness levels because it's so ridiculous. And no, I'm with you, man. What Dan's views on Goggins about him ducking deployments or never and going to all these schools, there is some validity to that because I've seen it happen before, and there is a term for that. We don't need to get into it now, but on that other end, Goggins is a tough son of a bitch too. Running ultra marathons is not fucking easy, and he overcame obesity. That's not easy either. Our buddy John Burke that we have on, same thing. Granted, they're a little bit different in their motivational styles, but that is not easy to do too, and that takes a freaking hell of a lot of dedication and intestinal fortitude. But when it comes right down to it, your job is to be a congressman, serve your constituency, shut the hell up, do it honorably, remember the values that we served with, and stop having petty, it is Real Housewives moments for everybody to see because you want to have somebody, you want to have those viral moments, like you said. But hey, man, that's what we got ourselves into. That's what it works for Trump and Biden and everybody else. It has since I don't know when, since 2012. Those viral moments are what makes politicians nowadays, but be better than that. Let's change that. And I think, isn't that why we want veterans serving, is because they're supposed to be above that, aren't they? Or maybe not. Maybe they're not above that, but I think they should be. And I'm in agreement with you, man. Shut up and do your job. This is not necessary. If you have a problem, deal with it behind closed doors, not so everybody can see it. Yeah, it's not necessary.
Yeah, I mean, in a sense, it's like you want to say that there's probably no reason for politicians to even be on social media because that's not what it's their job to do. But I'll tell you this, they could be doing positive things with it because the one person who comes to mind for me, and you guys might not like him as a politician, you might like him as a politician. I'm just talking about this one thing. Justin Amash, who is a congressman from Michigan. I remember when I was involved in that whole world working on Andrew Wilkow, the thing that stood out to me about Justin Amash was the only thing he seemed to put on social media when he was in Congress would be like, hey, today I voted on HR 375. I voted yes. Here's why. This is what I liked about the bill. This is what could be fixed about the bill. And he did this on Earth. This is why I voted no on this. And that's what these guys should be doing in Congress. I want to know how you're voting, why you voted that way. Did you actually read the bill? I don't care about that you had a problem with a Navy SEAL from something that happened 10 years ago, or because, let's be honest, he didn't write a blurb about your book that could have helped you sell more books. That's why I have an issue.
And rightfully you should, and everybody in America, if our heads were on straight, should as well. It's not an issue. And you know what, Dan, if you meant to like try to destroy David Goggins' career with this, it didn't work, but it probably had the extreme opposite effect. And within your own SEAL community, you have a gripe. You do. You have a legitimate gripe, but deal with it within your community. Don't deal with it where everybody can see it. It's not. I don't need. This is something that if I'd never had known about, it wouldn't have affected my life at all. Not that I know about it and affects my life anyway, but here we are talking about it. But it's something that, something that you guys deal with. SEALs take care of their own, just like Rangers take care of their own, just like Special Forces, ODAs, Green Berets take care of their own, just like Delta unit guys take care of their own. Take care of your own. Deal with every problem you have in your bubble and leave it there. But I for both guys, on a positive note, I have respect for Dan Crenshaw and his service. He served honorably. He's a bad. Yeah. I mean, you did. Goggins, I respect Goggins and his service, because being a SEAL, whether he had a lot of combat or not, just being a SEAL and then doing what he does, because I'm an avid runner. I love physical fitness. I know what injuries can do to you and how they can step you back. I'm going through one right now. To get through all that adversity, that takes a lot of intestinal fortitude as well. So both could be positive lights. And I think David probably is being more of a positive light in today's world than Dan is right now, but Dan still can be, and that's what they need to work on. Can't we all just get along? No, we can't, but we can still find the positives and everything and stop measuring dicks, which essentially is what you guys are doing.
And this idea though that like, and this original statement, right, that he goes, even though he didn't do all this stuff in combat, he's still in the Navy SEAL uniform and he's got the trident on the cover. Like, we've had guys on the show who have honorably served, who haven't been in combat. It doesn't make you any less of a veteran as long as you're not lying about what you've done. I'm pretty sure, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, if he's listening, like Jake Swig, I don't believe is a combat veteran. A guy who's very much out there in the public that me and him don't get along the best, but like Jonathan Gillum, he did not serve in combat. He still has every right to put out whatever book he wants and be on TV as a Navy SEAL. Like that's what he did. So as long as you're not saying I'm a combat veteran, there's nothing to be ashamed of about that.
And there's nothing wrong with you're not putting out bad poop. You're not putting out bad information. You went to Ranger school. You have every right to put a Ranger tab on a book. You did it. You completed it. Makes no damn difference if you went and fought in a global war. It sounds like to me when you told me and what I'm reading, and from now that what we've talked even more so about it, it's just a dick measuring contest. Come on, guy. And it doesn't do anything for anybody except put people in a negative spotlight, and it's not necessary. So Dan, get your head right. I think you're a tremendous human being. You served, you're a badass dude. What you went through and losing I can't even imagine. But your job is now to be a congressman. So serve with that same vigor and be the best congressman for your constituency you can be. And Goggins, just keep doing what you're doing, man. And to be honest with you, now I don't think David needs to answer any of it. I think he could just shirk it off. Don't even get into it. Be like, watch Wreck-It Ralph too. Wreck-It Ralph breaks the internet. What's the worst thing to do is read comments, read what people say about you. I don't do that anymore, because this is what it does. And then you feel the need to respond because the alpha male comes out in you. And now and what does that do? That just pulled you into the quagmire that you really should be, that you're above anyway, which he really is above all this.
I would respond though. If someone goes on a podcast and goes on a rant about me, I'm going to want to respond to that. And that's not just comments. And you know what? I forgot to throw out one more thing about this, because I mentioned it at the beginning. I didn't like this either. This is the last thing I think I have to say about it. Was I told you that Dan Crenshaw went on Aaron Singerman's podcast before he was arrested and said this. And so in Dan Crenshaw's video, he goes, I went on some podcast. I don't even know who it was. I don't remember giving this interview. It's like, dude, You don't just you're a congressman. I know you're not going on any podcast. You know what podcast you went on. You remember giving the interview. You remember what you said. And maybe it's just that you don't like that you were on the podcast for a guy who's now a convicted felon. It doesn't make you bad that you went on his podcast, but dude, don't lie about it. Just I went on Aaron Singerman's podcast with Redcon One. It doesn't mean that you approve of what he does. But when you go, I don't even remember giving this interview. I don't remember. It loses you credibility because I know you're lying.
Yeah, it does. It does take. It does taint your integrity right there. Your efficacy is kind of been tainted a little bit. No, you do, and you have staffers that know. I'm with you, brother. I get it. I've been. Hey, when Task and Purpose came out and said that Delta saved us, I had to have a comment. Thinking back now, no, I didn't need to. But now I can think back now because I did comment about it. So I can't say, well, I shouldn't have commented. I didn't need to comment about it. Well, it's easier for me to say now because I did comment about it because
you
it was
should
wrong.
Though. You were there.
It is
you
hard. And that's the where now if somebody said it, I can say, nah, I don't give a fuck. You know what? You guys believe what the hell you want. I know what happened. And that's why I go with just giving some advice to David now. And he can take it if he wants. He doesn't have to. And he's his own man. He's his own person. Now that you've been through this, you've done it. You've said your piece. Don't get in the ditch anymore. Don't get in those weeds anymore. And being a motivational person, it does show a lot of your character, especially when you're in front of a crowd, when you aren't in those weeds. Because they do. And I've seen it just being a speaker myself, where people are like, man, you didn't respond to that. Somebody said this, or CNN or Fox or the Daily Wire or something. And I'm like, well, I didn't even know that. What'd they say? So what? You know what? I've answered it a long time ago. I don't need to say it. It's not important in my life. And it does show character. But yeah, I'm playing my own devil's advocate here. You're right. It's hard to not say something when it's out in public, especially when you know it's not true or it's a question of your character. But if you keep getting into those weeds, it just turns into a dick measuring contest, and that makes both of you look bad. And maybe that's all Dan wanted, to make them both look bad. But I am in complete agreement with you on the side of Dan doesn't even need to be a part of this. Any congressman doesn't need to be a part of this at all, because it doesn't do anything but to help this country at all. And in fact, it just divides veterans is what it does. And we need to show, if anything, veterans need to set the example and show some sort of solidarity of coming together, and that people of all different ethnicities, genders, whatever, service branches of service, wars that you fought in, that we all together set the example. Easy for me to say now. I don't always do that, but I try to. And no, I'm glad you brought it up. I think this is important, and I'm glad your viewpoint is extremely valid here too. I'm in complete agreement with the Dan Crenshaw. Just, hey, dude, shut up, do your job. That's what your job for. Stop getting on and doing tweets. Just because Trump does it doesn't mean you need to do it. And I don't think it's the right thing because Trump does it either. It's not the right thing to do. It doesn't help this country at all. And it definitely doesn't help the special operations community. My opinion, there's my 2 cents right there. All right.